Hello. So today you can see I'll be doing a video on 1750 Britain versus France. I think this game came out in 2017. I bought it used about a year and a half ago. I played it one time. I think it was last April. Um, Thought it was okay. I've gone ahead and done another playthrough yesterday. So I'll give a few of my thoughts on it after I show you how to set up and play. So let's get started. Alright, first thing you'll do is take this deck of historic event cards, shuffle the deck, and deal out 10 face down. This is kind of the game timer. And you'll put a card next to them that says start of turn draw deck, and just put that next to those so you'll know that that's the deck you draw from at the start of your turn each round. The rules specify that no player can look at these cards or the rest of the cards in the historic event card deck once this deck has been created. I think that's probably pretty normal in games. I didn't know that needs to be specified, but it is. Anyway, then you place the rest of your historic event cards next to the card here that says historic event cards for purchase. So you just know those cards will be available for purchase. You have your 10 cards up here that are drawn at the start of turn. The rules then say to put the political objective board on the table. It shows in the manual, it shows it between the start of turn deck and the historical event cards for purchase. So that's how I've done it here. I've put the political objectives board in between those two decks on the right side. Players decide whichever side they want to be, French or British, in whatever manner they choose, flip a coin or whatever. Then each player will take their battle deck and their player mat and put it on their side of the table. Now you're supposed to play on opposite sides of the table, but I'm going to have mine, since I'm playing on a smaller table, I'm going to have mine side by side. So one place I kind of find that the rules kind of miss the mark is when they're describing the components, they have no images. So when I was reading the rules and it said take your battle deck and your player mat. Now the player mat's kind of obvious, but which deck of cards is the battle deck for which side? It's there's no image. You kind of just have to fiddle around with all the different cards that come in the game and figure out which is which. So I do think the rules kind of miss the mark there on showing what components are what. It tells, you have a battle deck and how many cards it is, but it doesn't show an image of what the back. So, this is the back of the British battle deck, and this is the back of the French battle deck. So, I mean, if it would have just had an image of that, that would have been helpful, but it didn't. Anyway, so the French player board looks like this. But this is their battle deck and battle deck for the British. So each player will take their battle deck and board and put it on their side of the table. The rules then say the players decide which Spanish and Dutch leader cards are available for purchase by either side. Well, again, it's kind of hard to figure out what were the Spanish and Dutch leader cards, but I figured that out. And decide which are available for purchase by either side. That really didn't mean too much to me, but looking on the forums, it looks like you can either just make these available, just put them up on the table somewhere and make them available where either side can purchase them at some point during the game, or you can decide that two of them, like the Spanish, can go in the British battle deck and the Dutch can go in the French battle deck. Or maybe only one side gets has the available to purchase them. It kind of, there's no set rule how to do it from what I could come up with in the forums, and it's certainly not mentioned in the manual. So the way I did it is I just put these up at the top of the table and made them available to either of the players to purchase. All right, then the rules state the gold coins, control markers, dice, and export cards can be placed anywhere on the table. Alright, then you'll take the colonies deck, which again, you have to figure out on your own which one that is, but it's this one. And you'll draw cards. You'll have 4 theaters. You'll have the African theater, North American theater, Indian theater, and Caribbean theater. So, and you'll lay them out Caribbean, North American, African, Indian. You're going to draw from this deck until you get 3 colonies for each theater. So start with this one. You can tell what theater it is. Looking here, it's Africa. So we'll just put that here. You're going to lay the cards out for each theater adjacent to each other, kind of lengthwise. This one's Caribbean, so we'll put it up here. We got North America, so we'll put that here. I'll go ahead and finish this off camera and come back and show you my setup. Alright, so I got 3 colonies up here in North America. What do we got? Then we got 3 colonies here in India, 3 colonies here in Africa, and 3 colonies up here in the Caribbean. Then you'll take this card that says High Seas and put it in between, in the middle between all the colonies. Now during the game, each of these colonies that is touching each other, are considered adjacent. So this one's adjacent to this one's adjacent to this one, and so forth. All colonies are adjacent to the high seas. So, you know, for movement, when we get to that, you can move from here to here, or from here to here, or you can move from here to the high seas, and then another movement could take you from the high seas to any colony. So again, adjacent colonies, or colonies that are touching, are adjacent to each other. All colonies are adjacent to the high seas. Alright, once those are laid out, you establish which colonies are controlled at the beginning of the game. You do that by, of course, first having a roll-off, so each player will roll a dice, see who gets the high roll. We'll say that's French. Then that player decides whether they want to take the first turn of the game, or if they want to put the first control marker down, choosing which colony they want to control first. If they decide they want to choose which colony they control first, then the other player will get to take the first turn of the game. So in this instance, you know, I had a roll off, say French rolled high. He decided he wants to go first, take the first turn of the game, so then the British player gets to place a control marker first. So say a British player decides he wants to control this colony. Then they take turns, so now the these are double-sided, by the way. Then the French player will decide a colony he wants to control. Say he does that. Then it'll be back to the British player deciding a colony he wants to control. They'll do this until each player has chosen 3 colonies that they want to control. So this will be the British's last colony they can choose. And then the French can choose one more, and, you know, say they go here. So now each player has chosen 3 colonies. Now when you take control of a colony, you take the export that goes with that colony. So the British will have to take a ivory export, an indigo export, and a what is that, fur export. And the French will take a fur, a silk, and a precious metals. and that is this deck of cards. So I'll get those out and lay them out and show you how that works. Alright, so you'll take the export cards, as I was saying, depending on the colonies you control. So the British got an indigo, an ivory, and a furs, and the French got a furs, a silk, and a precious metal. So you'll take those export cards from the export deck and just place them in your play area. Now, if you ever lose control of that colony, so if the British ended up taking control of this colony and got the silk, then you have to give up your silk and put it on the British side of the board. The British would take that and you would lose it. Each player then gets 3 gold in their treasury, which is on your player mat. Let me get the 3 gold for the French player. Again, normally you would be on opposite sides of the table, you know, one player over there and one over here, but again, on that side of the table is my window, so I can't do that. So I'm playing side by side here. Each player will take their 2 starting cards into their hand. Again, these have the same back as the historic event cards. You can tell your 2 starting cards because they have, the British has the British symbol and the French has the fleur-de-lis symbol there. So each player will take their 2 starting cards into their hand. Again, these would be hidden from your opponent, but since I'm playing solo here, I've just got them laid down. Then each player will draw 3 cards from the cards available for purchase to make their starting hand of 5 historic event cards. So that would be for the British and for the French. You then take the secret objective deck, which is the deck with this symbol on the back. Shuffle that up. Each player draws 1. You don't show it to the other player, and that shows you a way to score additional points or something at the end. So if the British player drew this one, if you control at least 1 colony, all 4 theaters, you gain an extra victory point. Again, you keep that secret from your opponent. This is for the French. Put that in your play area, keep that secret from the opponent. Then just put the secret objective deck out of play. So that's it for setup. At this point, you have your theater of colonies, you got your player boards with your starting hands, starting money, starting exports, your political objective deck, your cards available for purchase, and your start of turn cards, and we're ready to play. Alright, so how do we play the game? Well, this turn sequence printed on the player board does a pretty good job of telling you the exact steps you can take on your turn. So you can see the first thing that the player does on their turn is draw a historic event card, and you do that from the start of turn section up here. Remember, there's 10 cards in there. So when the last card is removed from there after each player's taken their 5th turn, then that ends the game and you go to scoring. So the first thing you do, the player will draw a historic event card, add it to his hand of cards. Now there's no hand limit of these cards, and these cards can be played, pretty much at any time, and as many cards as you want to play. And you have to look at what their action is. For instance, this one says play in an opponent's play area to destroy or reduce their political objective rolls by -1, or destroy 1 intrigue at court in your play area. So if somebody had played this on me, I could play one of these to get rid of it, or I can play it on another player, and then when he does the political objective, which we're about to get to here shortly, he has to get a -1 on his roll. And so there's various cards here, and they all have different effects. Place on your side of the table, your political objective rolls are +1. Just various things. And anyway, if they don't state a specific time you can play them, you can play them at any time. There's some that you play on even on the opponent's turn. So anyway, Draw historic event card from the start of turn. Then you can perform any actions on your colonies. Now, any colonies you control, some of them may say, like this one, if you control with a leader. Now, at the beginning of the game, there's no units out here, so you don't have any leaders. But if you do have a unit with a leader, and these units come from your battle deck, if you have a unit with a sword here, that means he's a leader. So if the French player had this unit here, then at this point of the turn, after you draw your historic event card, then you do any of these actions on colonies you control. Of course, this one says British, so I should probably put it here. But like this one, if you control with a leader at the start of your turn, on a roll of 5+, you place a free fortress here. So you check your colonies. If they have an action you can take, if you have a leader there or something like that, then you take that action at this time. So then the next thing we do on our turn is political objective attempt. Now, if you look at this board, there's different political objectives, and they have a score you need to roll equal to or more than. For instance, this one, King of Sweden. Sweden enters the war on your side, gain 1 timber. And that would basically, you would get an export card on your side that would be a timber. This one, Native American Alliance, all of your units roll +1 in North America. So in the North American colonies, all your units would be +1. So there's various political objectives. They all have a score you have to roll higher than. Now you'll see some have 7+ or 8+. Well, you get to roll 1 6-sided die. So in order to get those, you either have to have a card like this one. That's one of the starting historical event cards for the French. Before attempting, add +2 to 1 political objective attempt. Place this card out of play. Most of these historical event cards, once you play them, they get discarded. Some of them, like that one we saw earlier, you can play into another person's play area and it stays in play until they discard it. But this would be a way you could add to your roll. The other way you can, as you can see here, is you can spend actually 1 of your gold to boost your score by 1, or 2 gold to boost it by 2, but that's the most you can spend is 2. So we'll just say I wanted to do this one to get the 1 timber. I'd make the roll 5+. I only needed a 3+, so I would get it. So then I would get a timber out of the export cards and put it into my play area with my other exports. If you're successful in getting your political objective, so if I rolled the 3+ and I was successful there, then I put one of my control markers there to show that I control that political objective. Now, another player can still attempt that political objective, and if they are successful at it, then they remove your control marker and put theirs, and then they get whatever, the bonus. So like this one, I would have to give if the British player controlled this and had that timber, and the French player attempted this, and they were successful, then they would flip it over to the French side, and the British player would have to give them the timber exports. Alright, after you've made your political objective attempt, then you can make purchases from your battle deck. So remember, each player has their own battle deck, and you can just turn it over and look at the units in here, and the cost is seen here. So this guy costs 2 gold to buy. He's a leader. He gives +2 to rolls when he's in combat, and we'll talk about battles later. This is just little information, tells the guy's name and what notable victories I guess he had in history. So you've got things like that. You've got a plantation, which costs 1 gold, and you can put one of those on your colony, and it lets you take an additional export from that colony and put it in your play area. Oh, we got stuff like privateer, costs a coin. That becomes a unit for you. It just rolls a dice. It doesn't get any bonus, like we saw that leader got +2 to his die roll. And can take control of colonies, or may not take control of colonies. Instead, opponent loses 1 gold and you gain 1 gold. So this is good to move to an opponent's colony that may not have any units. And if you move it to his colony, then instead of taking control of it, he would have to give 1 of his gold to you. So anyway, there's different units and things you can buy in your battle deck. When you purchase them, say we purchased this, and I don't know, this. They go into your purchases area, and then you put your gold into the bank that you've spent. You can also, during the purchase phase, you can buy historic event cards from the historic event cards for purchase deck for 1 gold each, and then they just go immediately into your hand and they're available for play immediately. Units that you've purchased from your battle deck, as I said, normally just go into the purchases area. I think there's a mercenaries one that you can immediately put onto a colony you control, but majority of units that you purchase from your battle deck go into the purchase area, and they're not immediately put into your colonies. All right. One thing I should have mentioned on purchases: any money you don't spend, you lose. So when you're doing the purchase phase, you might as well spend it all, because at the end of the purchase phase, any money you didn't spend, you just lose at that time. So you spend it all. All right. After purchases, you go to movement. So movement is any units you have out on colonies. Now remember, it's not units you just purchased. They've stayed in the purchase area for the most part. So units you have at colony. Now, the reason I have these French units facing this way is because, remember, you're on the opposite side of the table. So normally, one player would be on this side of the table, his units would be facing this way, and the other player would be on that side of the table, so his units would be facing this way. So one player's units will be on one side of a card, one side will be on the other. So in this case, I've just got my French unit facing that way. So when you move during movement, each unit can move, as I said, during setup, to an adjacent colony. So this guy can move his unit over to this colony, which is not controlled by anybody, and he would then immediately take control of that colony, get to put 1 of his control markers on it, and immediately take the export and add it to his side of the table for that colony. So if you ever move your units into a colony that is not controlled by anybody, then you immediately take control of it and get the export for that colony. So this guy could move to this colony, or he can move to this colony. You can move to an adjacent colony, or you can move to high seas. Now I already have a person there. It wouldn't matter. I could move this guy to the high seas also, but that would be his 1 movement. Now, in this example, I already have someone at the high seas. He can move to any colony in any theater, because all colonies and all theaters are adjacent to the high seas. So I could move this guy if I wanted to go to battle another British. Now, the British have no units here, so I would immediately take control of this colony, flip it over, and tell the British guy he's got to give me his Indigo export card, and I would put it in my area. But if the British did have a unit there, then I wouldn't immediately take control of it during movement. We would have to resolve a battle when we get to battles, which is the next step I'm going to talk about. But anyway, during movement, you move all the units that you are going to move, and then you go to the next step, which is resolve battles. So as we see, the next stop is battles. Resolve battles in any order you decide. Now, for instance, let's say the French had moved these 2 players to this British colony, and the British had these two units here. Now, when the attacker decides to resolve battles, you have to pair up units as best you can against the existing units. So the attacker would decide, since he moved those two units there, he would decide who he wants to fight against this guy and who he wants to fight against this guy. So they're both +1, so it wouldn't matter. So maybe he decides, all right, this guy is going to fight against this guy, and this guy is going to fight against this guy. So as best you can, you create your pairs. If you have more, if the British guy only had one guy here, then we would end up having both those pairs fight that guy. And we'll talk about that just in a second, but we'll say it was this way. Then you resolve them one at a time. So this guy rolls 1 dice and adds +1 to his roll, and this guy does the same, rolls 1 dice and adds +1 to his roll. Now either side may have some historical event card that they can play that might add to their roll or something. So if they do, they play that. But in this instance, we say we don't. So they would each roll 1. So let me just bring my little dice roller over here. So the British guy, he rolls his 1 dice. He got a 4, +1, so he's a 5. The French guy, he rolls. He got a 4 +1, it's 5. If it's a tie, neither one of them wins. They just stay there. In this instance, local allies, they don't get any plus to their roll, so they would do a 4. This guy gets a +1, so he rolls. He got a 4. Well, that's a terrible example. Both of them tied. But if you did, then you just battle again. So again, we'll say this is the British guy. He got a 2 +1 is a 3. French guy. God, are you kidding me? Anyway, if if one of them did win, if the French guy beat this guy, he would just get discarded into a discard pile. He's basically out of the game. So you would just put him into a discard pile. Now, if you lose a unit, if the French guy had lost, because he's a leader, he doesn't just get discarded out of the game. The British guy would actually put him in his prison. So any leader you defeat goes into the prison. Into the player who defeated them goes into their prison. If they're not a leader, they don't go into prison. They're just out of the game. Now, if this battle was like this, where the attacker, he has 2 units and the defender just has 1 unit, well, he still rolls his 1 dice and adds +1 to it. These guys still each roll their dice, and they each have +1, but you don't combine the score. If you just hope that gives you a better chance that one of your guys will roll higher than this guy. So in this example, we'll say he's going to roll. He got a 4 +1, so he got a 5. So this guy would roll. Good God, he got a 5. This guy would roll. He got a 7. So he would end up defeating this guy. Now, if it happened that this guy ended up getting the higher roll than either one of these guys, because remember, their scores aren't combined, as you're trying to hope that one of them gets high enough to beat him. But if he beat one of them, then the loser would decide which one of his cards he removes. So in this case, if this guy won, rolled higher than both of those guys did, then the French guy could say, all right, well, I'm going to make this guy be defeated, and he would just be out of the game. If he chose to have this guy be defeated, then he would go into the British player's prison. Then you would still have 1 unit there, and then these 2 would fight again until one person is the only person with units there. And if the French won, then they would take control and get the export. If the British won, then they just remain in control of this colony and keep their units there. So you would go through and do battles in any order at all colonies that have units from both sides, and also in the high seas. If there's units from both sides in the high seas, then you have a battle there as well. Only nobody takes control when the person wins. So finally, after battles are resolved, you do the place purchases. So any units you purchased in the purchase phase that are in your purchases area, you can now place them out. And you can place them at colonies that you control or in the high seas. But you can't place them at a colony you don't control, that nobody controls, or that's controlled by another player. You have to place them at colonies you control or at the high seas. And finally, you collect income. So you'll always collect 3 gold, and then for every set of 3 different exports you have, you can collect another 1 gold. Now you can't. They have to be 3 different complete. So you can't use one of the cards from one set to help another set. So like if I had over here an indigo and a fish, I couldn't count this set for 1 and then say I'm also going to count this furs, to go with my other set. So it has to be 3 different sets, or I mean, it has to be three different types of exports, and they have to be different sets. You can't use the same export to count in a different set. It's not a confusing concept, but my explaining it is. But anyway, in this case, I would get my 3 gold plus 1 extra gold for having a set of 3 different exports. And that would be the end of my turn, and then it would go over to the British turn, and they would follow those same steps. And you continue to do that, each player taking turns until you've gone through the deck of the 10 start of turn cards, so that gives each player 5 turns basically, and then you go to scoring. So after the player that drew the last card finish his turn, you go to scoring. Each controlled colony is worth 1 point, and whoever has the most points. Also your secret objectives could be worth extra victory points. So whoever has the most points from controlled colonies, and if they got their secret objective points, then they win. If there's a tie for the most points for controlled colonies and secret objective, then the first tiebreaker is the player with the most prisoners. Whoever has the most prisoners would then win. If that's a tie, the player with the most controlled political objectives would win. So the second tiebreaker would be whoever controls the most political objectives. Then if there's still a tie after that, it would be the player who has the most export cards in their area. So hopefully by the time you get to that, somebody's won and wins the game of 1750. There are some advanced rules and optional rules in the rule book, but I didn't go over that. I just went over the basic standard rules. So let me reset everything, and we'll go over a few example turns just to make sure it all sinks in, and then we'll wrap it up. Alright, I've got everything kind of set back up how we were after setup. So French is first player, because that's what we decided when British got to put their control token down first. So French player will draw from the start of turn deck. Let me look at his hand to see what he might want to do. I'm going to go ahead and play this trade dominance, gain 1 gold, or for every export you have 3 or more of. If your opponent has less than that, they lose 1 gold. Well, I'm just going to gain 1 gold, so I'm going to put this as a discard pile. I'm going to gain 1 gold, put that in my treasury. Alright, if I had any leaders on colonies, I might have actions to do there, but I don't. So the next thing we do is attempt a political objective. I'll just go for this first one to get that timber export. I'm not going to pay any gold for extra or anything, so just roll. Got a 6, so I complete that. So I put a control token on that, and I get the timber export. So I got that, put it in my play area. Now I go on to purchases. Alright, I'll purchase this guy for 2, so that's 2 gold. Let's see. And I'll purchase this local allies for 1. And that leaves me 1, and I think with that 1 I'm going to buy another card. So let's see what I get. Okay, put that in my hand. Alright, go to movement. Well, it's the beginning of the game. There's no units out yet, so nobody to move, nobody to battle with. So now I can place my purchases. Alright, I'm going to place this guy here in the Caribbean. Put him on that side, remember, because the British are going to be on this side of the cards. And then, remember, you got to normally put these at colonies you control. However, this local allies card says may enter play at an uncontrolled colony. So I'm going to put that here. And that'll make me control that. And then I get a sugar export. So I'll take that, put that in my play area. So I've placed my purchases. Now I collect my income, which is going to be 3 gold plus 1 for this, and I don't have another set of 3 different, so it's just going to be 4 gold. Alright, there's my 4 gold. Put it in my treasury, and now it's going to be the British player's turn. Alright, British player is going to draw his start of turn card into his hand. He doesn't have anybody out at colonies at this time, so he won't have any colony actions. I think I will play this, destroy 1 local allies, or return 1 of your prisoners, which I don't have any, but I can destroy an enemy's local ally. He put that local allies out. So I will play that and destroy that local allies. Now that just goes into a discard. It doesn't go back into his battle deck. Alright. Then I'm going to play this into my opponent's play area. Their political objective rolls are -1. They can cancel it by placing 1 of their leaders out of play, one that they've already purchased and isn't captured. So just put that in the French play area, and now all their future political objective rolls are -1 until they decide to get rid of that. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and move on to my political objective, and I could try to get the one he has and take it for myself, but I'm going to I think I'm going to try to go for this one. Need a 5+, and it gives me 2 sugar. I'm not going to spend any money or anything. By the way, if you haven't seen any of my other videos, you may not know this dice tray is something my daughter made me years ago, and so I just use it because she made it for me. But anyway, so I didn't get my political objective, so oh well. Alright, next step is purchases. I'm going to go through my battle deck, see if I want to purchase anything. Alright, I went through my battle deck. I'm going to purchase these 3 cards. That's going to cost me 3 gold. Put it up there. Alright, again, it's my first turn, so I don't have anybody to move. I don't have anybody to battle with, so we go on and place my purchases. So I'm going to place this guy here. I'll place this privateers at high seas. And I've got a local allies myself, which I can place at an uncontrolled colony. And I will do that here. And I'll take control of that colony. And I get to get a fish export. So I've got a fish export. Put that in my play area. And that's it for my placing my purchases. And now I collect my income of 3 gold plus 1 for that, so 4 gold. Alright, that's the end of the British turn. Now we're back to the French turn. Alright, French turn. First thing you can do is to take a start of turn historic event card. Since they played that popular uprising on me, I'm going to play the intrigue at court to them, placing the opponent's play area to reduce their political objective rolls by 1 or destroy one. So they'd have to have one of these to destroy this. So I'm going to put that in their play area. Alright, I don't have any other cards I want to play right now. Now, I may have some actions on the board. I do have a leader here, and it says at the start of turn, if I have a leader there, to roll a die on a 5+, I can place a free fortress there. I didn't get it. Oh well. And that's the only unit I have on the board right now, so I won't have any other actions. So now we go to my political objective. Remember, my attempt will be at -1 because of this card. But I'm going to play this Splendor of Versailles, and it'll add 2 to my political objective attempt. But then this card is out of play. I'll just put it in my discard pile. So I'm going to try this one for the Archduchess of Austria. They enter the war on my side, and I get to place 1 forces released from Europe on a colony you control. Alright, it's 5+, but I get +2, so that would be 3+, but -1 for the card they played, so I have 4+ for this to happen to me. Now I could pay some money, but no, that don't count. It rolled out. Oh, good, 6, so I get it. So there's a deck of cards I may not have mentioned at the beginning, but they contain like these forces released. So this one, like I said, that I just got, it says I get a forces released from Europe, from Austria. So I get this, forces released from Europe, Austria, and that goes on a colony I control. So I think I will put that over here. And I got to put a marker on that political objective I was just successful on. Alright, next is purchases. So I went through my battle deck, and I'm going to purchase these 3. That's going to cost me 3 gold. And that's going to leave me 1 gold, which I'm going to buy another card with. So let me throw that in there, draw another card. Oh, I think I have 2 of these now. Okay, put that there in my hand. Alright, now we go to movement. I've only got 1 guy on the board. I don't want to move him, because then that might leave me vulnerable to this privateers or this guy. So I'm not going to do any movement, so we won't have any battles, and I'm going to go ahead and place my purchases, go to the next step. So I'm going to place old Charles Duchamps de blah blah blah. My local allies are +1 here. I don't have any, but I'm going to place him there. I'll place this guy over here. And then I have this plantation, which I can put on one of my colonies and take an extra export from there. So I'm going to do that over here. And I get to take an extra precious metal. So I got that. It goes into my area here. And now I'll have 2 sets of 3 different exports. And speaking of that, we'll go to my collect income. I get 3 gold plus 1 for each set of 3 different exports. I'm going to get a total of 5 gold. Now there we have it. Goes in my treasury. And that's the end of my turn, or the French turn. On to the British. Alright, so the British will draw their start of turn card. We'll see what we got here. Well, I have this card. He's placed this card on me that gives me a -1 to my political objective rolls. I don't have the card to negate that, but I do have one I can play in my play area that gives my political objective rolls +1. So I'll play that. Alright, then I check my colonies. I have this one where if I have a leader, which I do, at the start of my turn I roll on a roll of 6, my opponent loses 1 gold. So let's try that. Nope. Let's see, I don't have a leader anywhere else. So, alright, that's all for colony actions. Now I go for my political objective attempt. I'm going to play this card, add 2 to 1 political objective attempt. So, and then the card goes out of play, so I'm putting a discard. I'm going to try this one again to get the 2 sugar, so I need a 5+. So I got +2 to my roll. The -1 he had on me is negated with my +1. So, oh Lord, that's ridiculous. Alright, well, I failed again. Alright, so I'm at purchases. I'm going to purchase this fortress. That's 1 of my gold. Then I'm also going to purchase these German mercenaries. That cost 2 gold. But they do not go in my purchases. As you can see, it says you place add a colony when purchased. They may not leave the theater and destroy at the end of the turn. So you got to use them kind of quick. So I think I'm going to put these right here. And I control that colony, and so my plan is to move both these guys over here and attack this guy. Alright, I'll spend my last gold to buy a card. See if you get anything good. Yeah. Alright, so now I go on to movement. I'm going to move these guys and these guys over here. So we'll have a battle against this guy. And I'll move these privateers over here. So we'll have a little battle here. Alright, that's going to be all my movement. So now we go on to battles. Alright, I think we'll resolve this one first. He just gets a die with no bonuses. He just gets a die with no bonuses. Alright, so we're just going to have a battle here. So 1 die each. So the first one will be the French. He rolled a 2. That's terrible. I mean, that was the British privateer. The next one is the French. He rolled a 4. So this privateer is defeated and he just goes out of the game. Next we have here, it's 2 guys, the German mercenaries and the local allies against this one French leader. Now he has a +1. So first, we'll roll for him first, for the French. And he gets +1, 3, so he got a 4. Now, these guys don't have any bonus, so it doesn't matter. So I'll just roll 1 dice for each of them. And one of them did get a 5, so that beats the other guy's 4. So he's destroyed. He goes into my prison. And now I take control of this. And he has to give me his furs. So take his furs, comes over into my area. And that's really the only battles to be resolved at this point. So now I can place my purchases. I can place this fortress. It gives you a +2 to your rolls, but it can't be moved. I think I'm going to put that right here in the middle. And then I collect my income. I still just get 3, 4. I don't have another set here, so I get 4 income. I got me a little prisoner here, and that's going to wrap up my turn. So I think that gives you kind of a good idea of how the game plays. I think it's a fun game, and it's not long for kind of a war game. It's short. It's only 5 turns per player. Actually, I think it may be should be a little longer, and there is a variant where you can add more cards. You can add 2 more cards here to your start of turn deck to make the game last 7 turns each instead of 5 turns. So anyway, I think it's fun for a good short kind of little war game. As I said earlier, I kind of think the rule book could use some work. There's some work could be done for setup, and some of these cards aren't explained very well exactly how they work. I had to look on the forums to see if I could find some answers to how some of these cards work. But overall, the rules aren't terrible, and you can kind of figure out how things are supposed to work without too much digging around on the internet. So anyway, I enjoy it. I've only played it, twice now, and both times by myself solo. So I'd like to see how it works out when I play with someone else. Maybe one of these days I will. My family wouldn't have any interest in playing this, so have to wait till I get together with somebody. But that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.